speaker, and to our honorable chairman, our fellow speakers and fellow attendees. Today, I'd like to talk about the topic of the connectome, whole system immunity in the post-COVID era. This is essentially a Sattva Vijaya holistic perspective on prevention, particularly in this epidemic and pandemic time. The Wellbeing Trust has coined a term, actually the trust didn't coin the term, but has been publicizing the term of deaths of despair, projected deaths of despair during the coronavirus recession due to loss of connection. Let's explore this a bit. The epidemic within the pandemic. Although COVID-19 has had an unprecedented effect on our world today, more than 100 million cases globally, 2 million deaths globally, what's often forgotten or ignored is the average of 50% increase in deaths of despair due to isolation, depression, anxiety, and distress. This is a surge of deaths due to not physical health effects of the pandemic, but due to mental health effects of the pandemic, both on people who have been physically infected with COVID, but not just the 100 million people who have been physically affected by COVID, but the other 6 billion people or so who have not been physically affected, but nevertheless are suffering from this epidemic within the pandemic. This was a survey published just a few months ago in JAMA Network Open, not known to be a predatory journal, on stress among healthcare providers and the general population. You can see the rates of depression, anxiety, insomnia, and acute stress, which are radically increased compared to 2019 and the years before. JAMA Psychiatry pointed out in the beginning of the pandemic in March of last year, this is the age of depression. And they felt compelled to publish a review of treatments of depression, which could fall in Ayurveda in the areas of Sattva Vijaya, as well as Yukti Vyapasriya, and Daiva Vyapasriya in Ayurvedic terms. This experience of stress, depression, anxiety, and isolation among half or more of the general population in the world today is associated with long-term effects on physical health, as well as long-term effects on mental health and quality of life. This is another study from JAMA Network Open from only a few months ago, showing that perceived stress is associated with substantially reduced survival. The upper line is lower stress, the green line is high stress. You can see major increases in mortality or reduced survival. So as we've been hearing during today's session, these mind-body effects are real from the physical and the mental health perspective. And this has been discussed in Ayurveda for thousands of years, as well as in modern biopsychosocial medicine. A major source of medical news, at least in the United States, is Eyewitness News 9, a television channel. But this concept that the coronavirus and stress affects the immune system has now gained rapid acceptance, rapidly greater acceptance in these past months. Although the field of psychoneuroimmunology has been around for at least 20 years or 25 years, the mechanisms relating brain perceptions of stress through the autonomic nervous system to the cells of the immune system, and finally to cellular senescence or lack of resistance to disease has been well defined, but has gained increased importance in this COVID and perhaps post-COVID era. The connection between the brain and the immune system and the cells of the body are a major factor in predisposition towards COVID infection, according to psychoneuroimmunology data, to COVID death, and to the mental and physical health of those who don't have physical COVID infection, but are still living in this age of despair or age of depression, as JAMA calls it. This corresponds with the movement in modern medicine towards systems medicine, which views the body as a network of networks. The individual is a part of the network of society. Community health and public health is made up of individuals made up of organs, cells like immune cells, molecules, the genome, and some people talk about the inherent biological intelligence expressed in physical form in the genome. This is not foreign to Ayurveda, which was and is at its basis a system of holistic medicine or systems medicine, and talks about 4 major domains of health. And I call this confluence of the 4 major domains of health in modern terms the connectome, because they're all connected. And considerations of health must include the environment, which has been discussed forever in Ayurveda, and how graphic in modern times this COVID virus is in the environment. It's outside of us. And public health is the #1 preventive measure for the COVID pandemic, managing the environment, public and community environment, until the virus moves into the body, into an individual's body, affects their physiology. And as we've been talking just now, the body is influenced by the mind through psychoneuroimmune mechanisms. And there's a bilateral relationship. And then Ayurveda particularly specializes in something deeper even than the mind. It talks about Atma at the basis of Ahamkar, Buddhi, Manas, and then the senses and the physical body. In modern physics, this field, this inner intelligence of the body, is called the unified field of all the laws of nature, and discussed in this branch of quantum physics called unified field theories. But it corresponds quite closely to this concept of Atma or inner self in Ayurveda. So these are the 4 domains of total health, which are being more and more discovered and validated by modern medicine in this era of integrative health. This is another view of systems medicine from the point of view of both modern medicine and Ayurveda. On the left-hand side, we've seen a little more detail. We're part of the ecosystem of the universe, and certainly geographical forces and influences on our health are becoming more and more established, and Ayurveda has been talking about the effects of the whole universe, sun, moon, stars, and planets on the biological rhythms of the individual. And then the collective health of society is there, public health, and then the individual organism made up of systems and organs and tissues, made up of cells, cell components, macromolecules, and the building blocks of human physiology, proteins, based on coding from RNA, based on the DNA, I'm sorry about that. And DNA made up of these forces described by quantum physics, the matter fields, subatomic particles, the force fields, electromagnetism, strong force, weak force, and gravity. Those are united by supersymmetry, and as Einstein originally predicted, and as being more developed, or the unified field of all the laws of nature, then one can operate, experience, and operate at that fundamental basis of mind and body. We heard from the last speaker about the mind-body connection, and this systems view, the biopsychosocial spiritual view of Ayurveda in confluence with modern medicine, describes how we can, in principle, experience and operate on this common basis of mind and body to manage the quantum mechanical basis of our mind and body and create balance and health through that as a technology. That's the model. And some tests of that model. JAMA Psychiatry published a review of psychosocial interventions and immune system function, systematic review and meta-analysis just 6 months ago in response to this age of despair that has been and still is contributing to the global pandemic of mental health and physical health, and concluded from this review and meta-analysis that psychosocial interventions are reliably associated with enhanced immune system functioning and may therefore represent a viable strategy for improving immune-related health. So all the drugs are there, all the vaccines are there, and what modern medicine is now saying in one of the leading medical journals of the world is that mind-body interventions may be a type of vaccine or contribute to the vaccine type immune effect that we need during this traumatic time in world history. That was the meta-analysis. I want to show you some individual trials using Ayurvedic mind-body interventions. This is a study that my colleagues and I published in Lancet Psychiatry about 2 years ago, which was a comparative effectiveness trial of meditation with Vedic meditation or transcendental meditation compared to conventional psychological therapy in war veterans with post-traumatic stress disorder. This study was funded by the Department of Defense of the US government. And the meditation group is in the blue bars. The cognitive behavioral therapy is in the green bar, and control education is in the red bar. So what we found on interview measures and self-report measures of post-traumatic stress disorder is that meditation, Vedic meditation, was at least as effective as cognitive behavioral therapy in reducing objective and self-report measures of post-traumatic stress disorder. And in some measures, the transcendental meditation was more effective than cognitive behavioral therapy, particularly in the area of depression. This was a major breakthrough, and the US government is now looking more deeply into meditation as a therapy for PTSD, which at one time was thought to be limited to war military veterans, but is no longer in this area. Post-traumatic stress is affecting billions of people in the world today. This is another study on meditation, in this case, in patients with heart disease. Psychosocial stress is a known contributor to cardiovascular disease, and this study was published in the Journal of the American Heart Association called Circulation, one of the leading cardiology journals in the world. And this study was funded by the US National Institutes of Health. And in this study, we randomly assigned patients to either meditation in the blue bar or an education control matched for non-specific factors. And we measured rates of survival over an average of 5 years. That means disease-free survival, or another way of looking at it is the composite of death, heart attack, and stroke. These are all hard events based on death certificate records and hospital records recorded and analyzed blindly. On the left-hand side, you see the rate of adverse events, death, heart attack, and stroke in the control group. And on the right-hand side, you see about a nearly 50% reductions in death, heart attack, and stroke by adding meditation alone to conventional therapy, to usual care therapy, in addition to drugs, angioplasty, and bypass surgery, whatever was the usual care for the patients. We added on this experience of Atma twice a day for 15 or 20 minutes. So there you see psycho-neuro immune cardiologic effects of this experience of reconnecting with one's inner self, of restoring the connectome, you could say. This is a study that was published a number of years ago, but is very relevant to today. This is a study of hospital admission rates in subjects participating in Ayurvedic and meditation programs. There were 600,000 controls from normative database of a health insurance company, 4,000 matched controls in a cohort style study, and nearly 700 Ayurvedic participants. And these authors looked at hospitalizations for, on the upper, you see ENT, respiratory diseases, you can say. And the red bar shows the normative controls, the green bar shows the matched controls, and the blue bar shows the Ayurvedic participants. Again, this was a cohort study, so it was an observational study, but a controlled observational study with a large number of participants with completely objective data. And then the lower line shows hospitalizations for infectious diseases. The red bar again shows the norms. The green bar shows controls. And the orange bar, which you can hardly see here because it was so low, the blue bar shows the Ayurvedic and meditation participants had about a 75% reduction in hospitalizations for infectious diseases, and that corresponded with about an 80% reduction in hospitalizations for respiratory diseases. So isn't this relevant to today's concern with infectious respiratory diseases based on the connectome model of Ayurveda? In summary,
sir, excuse me. Yeah, we have got 5 more minutes to go. Yeah, thank you. Yeah,
in summary, the connectome was a term that was originally used to describe the connection between the different neural centers in the brain, which are illustrated on this diagram. But today we're expanding this concept of neural connections to neural connections throughout the whole body, because aren't the prana vahashrotas in Ayurveda connecting the whole body? Aren't the mano vahashrotas connecting the whole body with the level of manas and ultimately chaitana, or atma in Ayurvedic terminology? So the value of the connectome in reconnecting these parts, reconnecting our mind, body, and the intelligence of our environment with our inner self for whole system health and immunity in the post-COVID era. This is the potential for a holistic understanding of Ayurveda in contemporary times. Been a pleasure to be with you all here today. Thank you.